Welcome to The Factor, your trusted podcast for the life sciences industry powered by Kymanox. Today's episode is all about contract manufacturing organization selection. When organizations are considering a CMO, how do they find the right one for them? We're joined by two Kymanox executives, Ryan Doxey, Senior Director of Technical Services, and Jason Martin, Senior Director of CGXP Technical Services. To start, Jason gives us an overview of CMO selection as it relates to the life sciences industry.
One of the things that we're probably seeing more and more of in the life science industry is that we're getting a tremendous amount of pipeline activity with these organizations that are coming up with novel therapies, whether it be through cell and gene, ophthalmics, injectables. And one of the struggles of these organizations is that they don't have their own manufacturing capability. It's expensive. Real estate is expensive. The technology in which to manufacture is expensive. So what these folks are doing is they're trying to find an organization that can help them on the manufacturing aspect and be a partner. And I think that's where, when I think of CMO selection is, well, I need a partner to help me manufacture my product, but I don't know what I don't know. What does it take for me to find and partner with a CMO so that I can put my product in the best position to be successful?
Yeah. So that's a great intro. And, so one of the key things you talked about is the, CMO selection and these considerations: small company, large company, new technology versus an established technology. Tell me a little bit about, as the small fish in a big pond with a new novel technology, what should you be looking for?
So I think one of the first things is capability. You see, not every CMO is capable of executing on every platform. So what you really want to do is you want to find an organization that can actually execute your technology. Now, granted, some of the technologies are different, but at the same time, too, is that the expertise that's there. For example, you wouldn't bring your truck in to be repaired at a bike shop. You wouldn't do that. So what you do, the same holds true with, if I have a gene therapy, I probably wouldn't bring it to an ophthalmic CMO to manufacture my product. So the other benefit to that is that a lot of times they have learned experiences that they've had with other products that they've worked on, where they have some best practices, where they find some efficiencies, where they may have insight that you do not on how to manufacture your product. And that really does pay itself back in dividends. That's where I think it really helps to get an organization that understands and has, again, I use the word capabilities, has the capability to take on your product.
Understood. And so, coming into this as a two-person company, 2 men and a molecule, how should you go about the initial search for these CMOs, and finding these capabilities that fit your niche and still having them take you seriously?
So I think the first part of that question is, don't do it by yourself. Again, you don't know what you don't know, and you may not know the right questions to ask. And, I'll have some shared experiences I'll share that I'll explain as we go along in the podcast. But get yourself an organization, much like a Kymanox, if you will, that can help you navigate that journey. We have a very broad network of folks that we worked with. We've worked with multitudes of CMOs and CDMOs. And because we have such a diverse network of ourselves, that we've touched a lot of this. We have access to CMOs that, people just don't know they're there. And we have been doing this long enough to know where there may be a good fit, or at least a consideration for a fit. So I think that's really where a lot of that you first want to start. The other aspect of that too is that by getting somebody like a Kymanox that has the understanding, has the experience of CMO selection, we know what questions to ask, right? We know what questions to ask the CMO, so that because what makes a good relationship between a client and a CMO is the client needs to know what they're asking the CMO to do. Yep. It may be as little as, we just want you to make our product, or it may be as intensive, we want you to help us develop our product. The relationship just gets better the more that the client knows what they need.
Yep.
And so a lot of times they just need help with that.
Yeah.
They need help with that. And that's really kind of where they should start.
Yeah. So you mentioned the technical capabilities and the use of a company like a Kymanox to help when a small company needs a little bit of firepower to get into the door. So also, can you talk to me about how a company like us could also help with some of the non-technical needs around building trust and the need to build a trust between the client and the CMO?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd say too, is that's probably one of the largest sticking points behind capability that can sometimes make for a rough relationship, is that the trust and the cultural fit.
Yep.
An organization like a Kymanox is that we have founding relationships with a number of these commercial manufacturing organizations. We know how they work. Yeah. We know how they operate. We understand their culture. One thing you don't want to do is fit a client that with an organization has the capability to do it, but doesn't have the cultural fit with the client. That just makes for an abrasive relationship, and it makes for a lot of hardships along the way, or it can make for a lot of hardships on the way. So one of the aspects is that it's not just about the capability. It's really also about the cultural fit. Does this organization fit with the client? Because we have that experience, and because we not only have we used CMOs in the selection process, we've also supported CMOs in the work that they do. So we see both sides of that fence. And myself, having been a CMO provider and also having been a CMO client, I have the opportunity to see both sides of the fence. And that CMO relationship really is important between the client and the CMO. It's not transactional. It's got to be a partnership.
Right. And so, borrowing off of that a little bit, so, you've identified the CMO, you feel like there's a good cultural fit. How do you get in the door? How do you, get your company, your board to sign off on, sometimes a daunting, statement of work proposal, 6 figures plus, 7 figures plus, depending on the stage.
Yep.
Do you just go all in, or do you kind of piecemeal it up front to get in the door, show the value, show the progression?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's great. That's a great question. Is that I've seen it on both scales. I've seen it where it's an all-in package, right? Smaller organizations, the 2 men in a molecule picture is really stage it. And I think what you'll find too is a lot of CMO organizations prefer it that way. And what that does is that allows you gives you recalibration points where you can say, how is it looking? Does it look like this is going to be successful? If it's not, we can recalibrate and we have to pivot. Whereas if you're all in, you can lose sight and you can lose the oversight, if you will, of the project. This is where it's really important too, is to have someone who can liaise between the client and the CMO. The CMO is going to have a project manager. Many times the client won't have a project manager, but maybe they may have a director of CMC who's looking at data and things like that. But you really need somebody who has the experience of understanding what a CMO does, what a CMO is supposed to do, what a client does, and what a client is supposed to do. Right. Because they really do keep the expectations realistic between the two. That's right. I mean, you're going to have a master services agreement, a quality agreement, and things like that hold you accountable. But at the same time, too, is you need somebody who knows what the big picture looks like, what that big project plan looks like, and keeps everybody moving in the same direction. Great.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And so, again, building off of something you just mentioned, so the role of a project manager from the client perspective, how critical that is, right? So you mentioned the PM on the CMO side, but I would think they're looking out for their own interest, right? And that really strong need for PM on the client side.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't found too many CMOs where there's a self-interest, of course. Everybody has a self-bias, right? I haven't seen too many times where it's been the case where they haven't taken their client's best interests at heart too, right? Where there's some sort of mutual understanding. But that's where I think that the project manager on the client side, or that liaising person between the client and the project manager on the CMO side, that's where that relationship really buds. Yeah. There's discussions that happen there. Those discussions tend to be a bit more frank. Yeah. And there's a lot of candor that happens there as well. But you need that, right, because your CMO wants to be successful.
That's right.
If you're in a clinical stage product, maybe you're phase 1, phase 2, and you have the CMO and a CMO is manufacturing your product, trust me, a CMO would love to take you to commercial. Yeah. They'd absolutely love it. So if you don't succeed, they don't succeed. They want to be successful. They want to be a partner.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for that insight. And so, to pivot a little bit from the cultural side, let's talk a little bit about, once you're in the door and once you're completing, some work. So say you're, a phase 1, phase 2, and you're having success along the way, and it looks like you're going to go into phase 3. So at what point do you start talking about commercial supply and, getting NDA, BLA ready? Can you talk a little bit about that transition from early stage to later stage within the CMO organization?
Yeah, I think as the process continues to move forward, many times the client is asking that question as well. Yeah. Is, well, when do I get ready for a BLA? When do I get ready for a regulatory filing? They may not know, right? And that's where you really, again, you brought in somebody to help you find a CMO that fits your need. It's a right fit. Do the same thing. Yeah. Bring people in that have experience doing this to help guide you. I would totally expect a client to tell me, "Hey, I've talked with my board. My board says, we really want to go live, Q2 2025." Great. We're going to help you plan that. Yep. And we'll let you know if you should have started a month ago, or you can start in 2 months. Right. And then you work with that plan and you share it with the CMO. And the CMO helps you say, this is a realistic plan, or it's not a realistic plan. And then you work together on how to remove those obstacles. Right. But it's got to be communication. Has to happen both ways. You will not be successful if you're dropping uncommunicated plans and saying, we're going to be ready in 3 months to go GMP. And the CMO is like, that's probably not going to happen, and this is why. And that just can create a lot of conflict.
And talking about capabilities and, the need as you scale up. So, again, you're in phase 1, phase 2. They might not have the scale for the phase 3 and how to approach equipment procurement, capital expenditures. A lot of times smaller companies may see that as daunting and, just a huge undertaking that, financially they can't support. Bringing that to the forefront of the conversations with the contract organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is a huge sticking point for a lot of organizations, because you're right, it's expensive. If you've ever bought a mass spec or anything like that, they aren't free. Right. And so what we've seen done and what we've done in the past is we've worked with CMOs where, hey, we're going phase 3. We're looking at doing these larger production batches. Yes, we're asking you to purchase this equipment. And it's really trying to work with them on how do we get them to contribute to the capital expenditure. Yep. There's got to be value in it for them. They aren't going to buy a rare piece of machinery they're only going to use for your product and then when it goes away. Yeah. And the other aspect of it too is they may have capabilities. It may not even be at their current site, but it may be capabilities they can either bring in from another site or to another site. You see that a lot with testing. Yeah. They may not have the capability to do certain types of testing at their site, but their Richmond site has the capability of doing it. So, again, it just brings leads upon leads. Right. But you got to have those conversations early. Yeah. It's, hey, I'd rather have the conversation and the answer be, not right, not just yet, than have that conversation be, oh, we should have done this a long time ago. Yep. Then you're chasing your tail at that point.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that insight. So again, you're the senior director of CGXP technical services. So let's touch a little bit on the quality regulatory aspects and how critical the quality history and the regulatory history of a selected CMO is. Yeah. And, can you borrow from one or scrimp on one? If you have a really good cultural fit, but they're, a little bit shaky history, how do you kind of handle those situations?
Boy, again, having been part of an organization as a CMO, we experienced, this is in my past life, experienced an organization that actually received a warning letter. And that really shook up the business, obviously, and it shakes up the clients. Yeah. If I'm a client and there's maybe a little bit of shakiness around the regulatory aspect, it carries a ton of weight. Yeah. It carries a ton of weight. They may be great people, good cultural fit, but if you end up with a warning letter, consent decree, you're going. It's just it can be a game ender for you. So I would really, really focus on having the regulatory and equality stuff be rock solid. Need not be perfect. And what I mean by that is, and I don't mean cutting corners, but for example, if you have a medical device and you need an ISO certification, they may be on their way to getting that certification. They're telling you, hey, in 4 months, we're going to have that certification. We're currently executing on that. Okay, there's some risk there, but that risk isn't as great as we just had an inspection and we had 6 483s and a pending warning letter. Yeah, you probably want to stay away from them. Right. And many clients put in their agreements that if an organization gets a warning letter, or actually within their quality manuals, they can't do business with an organization under warning letter or consent decree. Right. Now what do? Now you're left scurrying to find another CMO. Yep. And with all the effort and everything you just put in to find one, that happens. Yeah. Boy, that could just lead to a lot of heartache.
Understood. Yeah. Very good points. And so, I think, from here, I'd like to talk a little bit about the landscape of contract manufacturing. And, it's only fair to bring up the recent Catalent, acquisition by Novo, to increase their own capacity. And, how do you see the landscape in the future with, these smaller or these companies entering these blockbuster GLP-1s and, needing capacity is the name of the game, right? Right. And not just contract capacity, but their own internal. So as we know, Novo Nordisk, purchased Catalent, basically took all of their biologic sites and are going to be dedicating them to their GLP-1s. Yep. Do you see others kind of following suit?
Boy, that's a good question. The real challenge here is they have to navigate between, is it cost effective to expand what we currently have? Do we have the real estate to do that? And does it make financial sense to do that? No. Or does it make more financial sense to go out and buy the infrastructure, right? If I have the ability to go out and buy the infrastructure, I'm buying the headcount, and I'm buying the equipment. It's already there, and if it's in good standing, a lot of your work is done. Yeah. So, if I need capacity, I need it quickly, that's the route I'm going. Yeah. If I need specialized capacity, obviously it's probably something I'm going to have to invest some CapEx into and build it out. Yeah. But this isn't uncommon. What we're seeing, I don't think, is uncommon in any industry. Right. I mean, we saw it in the auto industry. We see it in this industry. We see it in digital chips and things like that. Where I think that if I could cast a magic wand, is I would love to see more CMOs that will take on these smaller organizations. Yeah. Their clinical stuff, the phase 1s, the phase 2s. The large CMOs really tend to stay away from it because it's not lucrative enough for them. Right. It doesn't fit in their business model. Right. But there are a lot of good drug candidates out there that are really starving to get into a commercial manufacturer, just so they can get their project started, so they can get first in human, they can get trial data, but they're finding it really hard for these larger CMOs to allow them in. And hey, it's still a business. That's right. And when you're taking up commercial line time and the changeovers, it gets really expensive really fast.
Yeah. And so to that point, I think it's important to touch on the fact that if you are early stage, small scale, pilot scale, you can't fit into a commercial regime. You don't have the controls to fit in there. It's okay. Yep. There are organizations out there where you can go and deliver on phase 1, phase 2 clinical supplies, and then as you get successful, think about the future at a larger CMO. Or even build out the capabilities at the smaller one.
100%. You're 100% right. It's funny where I think where people struggle when it comes to those smaller batches is they're just not as well known. Yep. They're not a Catalent, they're not an Emergent, they're not a Lonza. They're not these big names, and so they're a bit harder to find.
Yeah.
But when you find them, that's really kind of like, that's the exciting part is, you have an organization, again, like Kymanox, that has the network of these smaller CMOs that can help. And you get that started. And to your point, the next phase of that is you get a product. And I mean, it's really giving you everything that you thought it would. Having that conversation with, maybe it's time we think about going to Alonzo.
Right.
Maybe now we do fit that business mold. And a smaller organization, it's too big for them. And there are plenty of smaller organizations that will come right out and tell you, we're not doing commercial.
Right.
We don't want to do commercial. We only want to do phase 1, phase 2, small batch stuff. But we will help you transfer the process to a larger manufacturer when you decide to go that route.
And, and so thinking about cost, that whole paradigm, it's natural. And, companies have to understand that, even though they feel like they might be pigeonholed and don't see a commercial forecast, it's out there. And it's actually could be more costly of taking your small process into a large CMO versus using a smaller CMO that's fit for purpose and then transferring out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's done all the time.
All the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, to kind of round this out, we talked about the cultural fit. We talked about the technical capabilities. Trust is number one, the landscape. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, your experiences and kind of the pitfalls and where we can help identify those pitfalls, eliminate them, and, really streamline the process of getting into a CMO, get going, and start delivering on clinical supply.
Sure. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, and I would tell this to I'm working with a number of clients right now with CMO designation. And I tell them to be very wary of an organization that does not do your current platform. And what I mean by that, if you're a gene therapy company and there's a ophthalmic company out there telling you, yeah, we can do your drug. We'd love to get into the gene and therapy market. I would be very, very careful doing that, extremely careful doing that. You are putting a tremendous amount of risk to your product.
Right.
Because you're dealing with folks that just don't have this experience.
Right.
They're not set up to do it. So unless you are really ready to be on the floor all the time, which many folks are not, I would be very much really just be very careful, careful there. I think the other thing too is around the cultural fit is having the ability to know what you're getting into culturally. And, it's very cliche, they talk about cultural fit and things like that. But where it becomes very important is you're not going to do well if you don't get along with your CMO and vice versa. Yeah. You're just not going to do well. Yeah. It just creates delays upon delays upon delays upon delays upon delays. And this is where a strong contract really, really helps you. Contracts can't be wishy-washy. The master service agreement can't be wishy-washy. It's got to be specific. It's what you're going to hold each other to, hold each other accountable to. So you got to make sure that you put the effort in. It's like anything else. All the heavy lifting is done at the front end.
Right.
So that's where I would say those two parts right there is to take a look at. Where Kymanox can really help is we've done all this. We've done all this before. We've seen it hundreds of times. We know where the tiger traps lay, and we've navigated this to the point that we can do it very efficiently. You can try this journey on your own. There's no harm in that. It's just going to take you more time. Where we have experience with very specific CMOs, have touched everything you can imagine on the biotech spectrum, and we can get you into a CMO that is right-sized, it's appropriate technology, they got the capability, they got the capacity, and they have the cultural fit. And everybody, the client, as well as ourselves, we're all part of the partnership that gets that part done, and gets the CMO done. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I'd like to touch a little bit on, outside of the process and the manufacturing capabilities, but also we hit a little bit on the analytical and how important it is to get in early and to understand where the pitfalls are with your methodology.
Yeah, that's another good point. just because they can make your product don't mean they can test it.
That's right.
And not every CMO has an analytical component, but they should know, right? They should know, and they should have the majority of it. This is where I think it comes really important when I talk about, the client really needs to know what they're looking for is, do you need a CMO? Mm-hmm. Do you need a CDMO? Uh-huh. Because they're two totally different things. Right. I mean, granted, we use them interchangeably, but do you need help on the development side? Would it be analytical development and things like that? Or no, I don't need it. All I need is somebody to manufacture it. Yeah. Okay, that's something different. But they should at least have the analytical expertise, if not to do it internally, to manage it if they have to do it externally, and understand what the testing means. Right. Great that you send it out. What does the testing mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And that is a key part where that's where the partnership comes into play.
Yeah.
Between the CMO and the client. So to your point, goes back to the beginning, is they need to know what they need. And that's where we help. Yep. Because many of these folks just don't know what they need. They've been in academia for a long period of time, and they have a product or they have a molecule like, look, this could be really beneficial for therapy, but I just don't know how to get it into the market.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is how we start.
And so, it seems like, really getting in and pulling the curtain back and looking at the inner workings of the CMO, CDMO, understanding what you need, and then doing an audit mm-hmm. of that CMO, going on site as best you can, in this post-pandemic, era, is really critical. So can we talk a little bit about audits and what to look for, phase-appropriate audits, for a early phase clinical supply versus a commercial type audit?
Yeah, that's we just, like I said, we're just doing this with a client they're academic mm-hmm. and they've never put a product in market, and we're sourced a contract manufacturer for them, and they ask us, well, what do we do now? Mm-hmm. Do we just give them stuff and they make it? Like, no. Yep. Nope. This is where we're going to do some due diligence here. Yep. They're going to tell us what they're going to commit to doing. We're going to tell them what we're going to commit to doing. We're going to put it on paper. And we're also going to visit the site. Yep. Let's go see what they're doing. And it was interesting because the chief executive officer asked, he said, will they allow us to do that? If they want your business, they want you to do that, right? They want you to do that. And it shouldn't be anything out of the norm. Right. You go there for a couple of days, you do an overall systems audit. Hey, do they have the minimum quality needs that they're supposed to have? Do I feel comfortable with what they're doing? How does the place look? Is it clean? Yeah. Is it put together? How is it run? Yeah. Anybody can make a beautiful website. Yep. Not everybody can make a beautiful plant. Yep. So, getting out there and talking to the people that will be working on the project, that's another critical part. Get in here and have conversations with them. Bring your team that's going to be working on it. Hey, if we go with you, these are the people that are going to be part of this team. It really does start to meld the relationship. Yeah. That's important. That's important. Again, talk about cultural fit. If you don't get along with them, you don't get along with your CMO, it's going to be a long road.
I agree. Been there, done that, right?
Right.
And so, to that point, in an industry where, having duplicates and triplicates of things is so important, having a backup plan. Mm-hmm. At what stage do you see that as being, the critical, kind of a critical milestone in finding a backup?
Right. Yeah. I would say, there is nothing wrong with having a secondary CMO. Mm-hmm. And just as long as you're honest with them, right? Is, hey, we have a primary, we're looking for a secondary. Mm-hmm. Many of the CMOs who are interested in the work, they're fine with that. Yep. They're a secondary to somebody, they're a primary to somebody who has a secondary, right? Yep. So I would say as you start to move into phase 3, mm-hmm. you really need to start thinking about that. Hey, because, God forbid, a good example is what just happened at Rocky Mount this year, where tornado comes through, damages the facility. You can't make product. Yeah. And here you are, you're trying to get, product to market. But having that backup, it's not that you don't trust your primary. It's just it's a business contingency. And absolutely. NFL teams have backup quarterbacks for a reason.
That's right. Yep.
There's really no different. But I think that having that conversation with them, and again, just be transparent. And I've never had anybody say, "Oh, why are you getting a backup CMO?" You know, they understand, and many times they have conversations with that CMO of this is what we're doing, and again, it's a partnership because they both know they have the same client.
Yep, and so you mentioned phase 3, and I totally agree with you. And sometimes if you can work that in, the earlier the better. Pre-registration.
Yes,
and have that secondary source in your filing. That's always a great thing.
100%, 100%. The more you can get ahead of that, the better off you are. I don't think it's a priority, like I said, when you're talking clinical.
Yeah.
But it's going to be at some point.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. So as we wrap up today, again, I want to thank you for flying down from Boston to join me here in this wonderful studio.
Yes.
I really appreciate the relationship we have and all the expertise you bring to this, to Kymanox, to our team. Any last thoughts? Any last words of thought?
First of all, thank you for having me. I apologize to those listening if I have a thick Boston accent, but my translator unfortunately didn't make the flight. But no, it's very near and dear to my heart to help the therapies that folks are working on, the new technologies and the stuff in the pipeline. It's so exciting. Yeah. But many of it doesn't get out there because they just don't know how to get it there. Right. Get help. Yep. Get an organization like a Kymanox that has been there, done that, can help ease you through the process and do it efficiently. Hey, this isn't new for us. It's not a learning experience for us to help you go through this. This is stuff we've already done, and we just really do enjoy watching the success of an organization who has a new drug product and getting it to market. Yep. I mean, that's awesome. When you do that and you're at that launch party and you're like, we did it.
Yep.
We did it. I mean, we truly did it.
Yep.
And that's what it's all about for us. So.
Yeah, because ultimately patients deserve better.
That's right. That's 100%.
Again. Yep. So thank you again. And look forward to the next one.
All right, brother.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
That was Ryan Doxey and Jason Martin on CMO selection in the life sciences industry. If CMO selection is something your organization needs help with, be sure to visit Kymanox.com. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode. Please subscribe or follow this podcast in whatever app you're using right now, or follow Kymanox on LinkedIn for all updates. This episode was edited and produced by Earfluence. We'll talk to you again soon on The Factor.